Well, Claire, if you have done business before, you know that in business, taking risk is normal, sometimes even necessary, but nothing quite prepares you for that moment when a risk turns around and bites hard.
It's not just in business that you take risks. I mean, life itself
It's a risk.
is a risk.
Good.
But I do have a perfect example recently, a manufacturer who actually took a loan to expand, her business. But unfortunately, economic climate, swung against her. And then one wrong turn and she almost lost everything.
Well, and that's the truth. Is not alone. Many businesses are working that same tightrope. High cost, low demand, and constant uncertainty.
Talk about uncertainty. And then you talk about CBN's Monetary Policy Committee. Yesterday's decision matters so much. For instance, the MPC held the MPR rate at 27%. It says it's keeping things tight as part of the push to tame inflation and also to stabilize the foreign exchange market.
The CBN governor, Olayemi Cardoso, said inflation has now slowed down for the fourth straight month. A sign, he says, that the policy direction is working.
Well, fair enough. There is a correlation between that and, what he said. But beyond that, the cash reserve ratio remains the same at 45% for commercial banks, while it's 16% for the merchant banks. Now, another signal of a disciplined monetary environment.
But Claire, while these decisions may look good at the macro level, businesses are still feeling the burn. High borrowing costs, shrinking margins, and lots of uncertainty. The question is, are relief and recovery anywhere in sight?
Well, certainly that's not a question for me. It's not.
Maybe for our guest.
Of course, especially when you look at the new NBS numbers. Now, headline inflation, it gave us, dropped to 16.05% in October. Now, it came down from 18.02 in September. And then you talk about food inflation. There was a sharp fall from the 39.16% last year. And now we hear it is at 13.12% year on year. Now, that's a big shift.
Yes. There are evidences concerning the food, dropping in prices and all that, which is good news. So today on Good Morning Nigeria, we break down what the 303rd MPC meeting really means for businesses, for the economy, and for everyone feeling the pressure, including you and me.
Absolutely.
I'm Ademola Adeoye. Thank you for joining us.
And I'm Claire Adelabu Abdurazak. We always thank you for joining us live on the network service of the NTA. Now, you can't beat this reach. And this is the only program, of course, where you get all the explanations about policies, programs, and actions of the government. All right, welcome back. I'm sure you must have heard the outcome of the CBN's MPC monetary meeting that held yesterday. Well, we hear most, if not all, the MPC rates, were retained. But what does that mean for you, for me, and for our pockets? Let's listen to the background report first by Ibrahim Ilugunda before we begin our conversation.
The Monetary Policy Committee of the Central Bank of Nigeria has voted to retain the monetary policy rate at 27%. CBN Governor Olayemi Cardoso announced the decision after the conclusion of the 303rd two-day Monetary Policy Committee meeting in Abuja. Members of the team deliberated on different macroeconomic indices and decided to leave the rate intact for another period. The Monetary Policy Committee retained the MPR at 27%, kept the CRR at 45% for commercial banks and 16% for merchant banks, and maintained the 75% CRR on non-TSA public sector deposits. Other decisions reached are retaining the liquidity ratio at 30% and adjusted the standing facility corridor to plus 50 and minus 450 basis points around the MPR. Expectations of another rate cut had risen after the release of October inflation figures showing continued moderation. Nigeria's annual inflation is to 16.5% in October 2025, its lowest level since March 2022, boosting confidence that price pressure are easing after months of strain on household and businesses. With inflation now decelerating, the Apex Bank delivered its first interest rate cut in 3 years in August 2025, signaling a gradual shift towards a more balanced monetary stance that considers both price stability and economic recovery. The CBN Governor Olayemi Cardoso explained that the committee's choice to hold the rate reflects its assessment that current monetary conditions are beginning to yield positive results, with gradual moderation in headline inflation and improved forex market liquidity as indicators that the tightening measures are working. How will the decision to maintain the MPR impact on the economy? How will the decision impact on price stability and economic recovery? And what are the expectations ahead of the next MPC meeting scheduled for February 2026? These and more will form part of the questions on Good Morning Nigeria, as guests are already seated in the studio for the conversation.
Thank you very much, Ibrahim, for that background report and the questions that you have raised. I'm sure that our guests have listened to those questions and they are ready to give answers to them. Well, joining us to discuss the MPC resolution, we have in the studio Victor Obo. He's the Director of Monetary Policy Department of the CBN. Dr. Obo, it's good to have you join us again.
Thank you.
Nigeria.
Thank you very much, and good morning, Nigeria.
All right. Also joining us to discuss the MPC resolution. Sorry, you need water? Okay. All right, they will give you. Sorry. Okay. All right. Also joining us for today's discussion in the studio is Professor Uche Uwaleke, Professor of Capital Market, Nasarawa State University. Prof, good to have you again.
Thank you, Damola. Good morning, Damola. Good morning, Claire. Good morning, Nigeria.
All right. Claire, you have this. Okay, let me just help Claire out here. We also have in the studio our third guests. We have Farouk Abdullahi, financial analyst. Farouk, good to see you.
Good morning, Nigeria.
Good morning to you too. All right, let's kickstart our conversation while we get some water for Claire so that she can clear her throat. Sorry. All right. Dr. Obo, let's look at the MPC resolution. All the rates were maintained. And not all the rates, yeah. Okay, but most of them.
Yeah.
Okay, tell us why. What are the resolutions this time around?
Okay, thank you once again, and welcome Nigerians to this forum. If you watch carefully in the past couple of meetings, the atmosphere was relatively tense. Okay. Tense because inflation rate was very, very high up there. But we have come to a horizon of, gradual deceleration in inflation, meaning that the rate at which prices are increasing are on a decreasing trend. And that means that we are approaching, a horizon where we'll be able to stabilize prices for the generality of Nigerians. It's also important to make this point that MPC meetings are not mere rituals. Every meeting comes with its peculiarity because of the depth of analysis, the rigor that goes into the analytics before the meeting. The data-driven approach employed by the current management of the bank and the Monetary Policy Committee is such that new data are subjected to rigorous analysis. So it's not just to sit down and then maintain the status quo and go away. we look at data, interrogate those data deeply. So coming directly to your questions, we were coming from a September meeting where, remember, there was a marginal rate cut by 50 basis points. And that was to appreciate the fact that with the little headroom we had in terms of inflation deceleration, there was need to give growth recovery a breathing space. That happened at that point in time. This time, after looking at the data, it was very clear that the previous rate cuts that had happened needed time for their impact to be felt and to be transmitted to the real economy. What it means is that when you tighten, you require time for the impact of that tightening to happen to the real economy. So that is what we call the lag effect. It takes time for this policy to actually permeate through the economy.
So we could see it run into next year?
Yeah, it depends. Depends on your transmission mechanism, the period it takes. Sometimes it could be 2 quarters, it could be 3 quarters. You get the point. But what it shows us is that we had tightened previously. The pace of disinflation, the degree to which inflation was trending down, appeared to be faster in the last 4 months than in the past, showing that the lag effect of those previous hikes still have some potential to be able to still bring prices down. So at this point, what is global best practice is to hold on for those lag effects to begin to, exhaust its potential on the economy. So that is on one side. The other point is that, people could expect a cut, which of course is their opinion. And monetary policy is also aware of the need for growth. But we should remember that inflation is still high at double digit. 16 is not yet to huru. It's not a good place to be globally. The best area or horizon for inflation is single digit. We are also comparing ourselves with our peer countries. Ghana, for instance, has hit 8%. Kenya is around 2%. India is lower. So even Egypt, that we were hovering around the same area, has come down to 12.5%. So we have to be competitive, because if your inflation is very high, it simply means that the real rate of return on investment is low or even negative, as is the case for some of the securities in Nigeria. Maybe I'll stop here.
Yes, Dr. Obo, thank you. I like I always say, this technical, languages I don't understand. We need to break it down. I know, Demola, if you understand it, I don't know. When we hear MPC is going to hold this, CBN is going to hold this MPC meeting, sometimes I hold my heart in my hands and not again, we're going to discuss this issue. And I'm sure a lot of Nigerians too do so. Now that the CBN has decided to retain the parameters.
Some.
Most of the parameters.
Yes.
Most of the parameters, especially the MPR.
Yes.
I'm just wondering, can we also advise the traders in the market to retain their prices?
Okay. The answer to that could be yes or no. And this is why. What we have done is that the MPR, which we call the monetary policy rate, is a signaling rate. What it means is that holding it means that the rate at which commercial banks would borrow from the central bank has not changed. And if it has remained the same, it simply means that it will trickle down to such that the rate at which commercial banks will lend to retail borrowers should also remain fairly the same. Okay. I'm saying fairly because there are other factors. Of course, you remember what we call ceteris paribus, all things being equal. Yeah. So there are other factors that also affect lending rates. You know, then you now talk about structural issues, cost of managing business, fuel, so many transportation and so on. There are several other factors that could affect it. But if you zero into the lending, the borrowing cost itself, it should fairly remain the same. That is what we are saying.
Okay.
I hope that is not too technical.
No. It's not too technical, but it answers the yes. We can say traders, retain your prices. What about the don't retain your prices?
As a matter of fact.
Yes.
Okay, Prof.
As a matter of fact, if you look at it critically, the central bank actually reduced that rate, the rate at which it lends to commercial banks. Just as he said, the MPR, monetary policy rate, is the rate at which the central bank, in its capacity as a lender of last resort, lends to commercial banks. Now, that rate, as you rightly noted, was retained at 27%. But there's something else the central bank did, which also amounts to, reduction in the effective lending rate, and that is the adjustment in the corridor. We said central bank retained all the parameters, but they adjusted the corridor. There is what is called corridor around the monetary policy rates. Okay, that corridor is the margin. Okay, if the central bank says MPR is 27%, okay, as we have it now, before yesterday, that corridor was plus 250 basis points, minus 250 basis points. I will also help you understand it. Now, 250 basis points means 2.5% plus. So it means that before now, if the central bank was lending money to commercial banks, central bank will lend to them at 27 plus 2.5. That is 29.5. So that is the rate at which they were borrowing from the central bank, 29.5. But now, central bank has reduced that corridor. Okay. Yes, from 2.5 to just 5, from 250 basis points, to 50 basis points. So now central bank lends to them at 27.5, plus 5, which is 27.5, instead of 29.5. So you can see a reduction. So, other things being equal, again, borrowing from what he said, ceteris paribus, we expect the banks to also respond and lower their interest rates. Right. Okay. Again, two things happened. I talked about corridor. Corridor, you have, on the one hand, you have the standing lending corridor facility, which is the 0.5. Central bank also reduced, or rather widened, the deposit side. When banks have excess funds, they tend to deposit them with the central bank, and central bank gives them a return, just as in a bank will also pay you when you deposit with the bank. Now, before now, the central bank...
Do they pay us?
Yes. Before now, the central bank, if you pack your excess funds with the central bank as a bank, central bank will give you 27% minus the 2.5. So that's 24.5. So central bank will give you interest on the money you are depositing. But now central bank has further, widened it, has now said, okay, it's no more going to be at 24.5. It will now be at 22.5. That is, they have now, reduced the return they give banks. What that means is that they're discouraging banks from packing funds. So banks will have more money at their disposal now in two ways. One, by borrowing, at a cheaper rate from the central bank, and by also having some, funds with them, they can also place with their, fellow banks. So what I'm saying is, now going forward, we expect that what the central bank has done, which in my view is a cautious easing. They're easing, but they're doing it cautiously. They're not touching the headline rate, but they're looking at the margins. Okay, it should also translate to lower lending rates, because central bank has effectively reduced the rate at which it lends to them. So banks should also in turn reduce the rate at which they lend to customers.
But you heard what Dr. Obo said, And you also repeated it, ceteris paribus.
Yes.
So the reduction, via the corridor,
Yes.
depends on ceteris paribus.
Yes.
But can you narrow this down now to what it means for the small
and medium
scale, yes, the
businesses,
keke, those people who would want to, now go and take loans?
Maybe Farouk can say something to that.
Yes, okay.
Okay, thank you. So let me give a holistic context to what we have been discussing. You see, the whole idea of this development revolves around the premise of efficient market hypothesis, which means it implies that the market reacts to certain changes in policy, information, and all of that. The question now is the Nigerian market fully efficient? Would say that yes, we are fairly efficient, we are getting there. And I also appreciate the fact that, the central bank is rigorously working on information, on data, to scrutinize data very well, to give out to the economy, the real impact of the data through policy formulations and whatnot. So what this means is that MPR adjustment and the asymmetric corridor, tweaking also would impact on the ordinary Nigerians in several ways.
How?
Prof has mentioned that, but let me put it in a more simpler form.
Yeah.
By virtue of the plus 50 and 450 basis points that was done, it simply means that the banks are discouraged to deposit money, to keep money with the central bank, because they are going to get less compared to when they give out money to, small businesses and lenders.
Okay.
Because they are making just 27.5%. They are making 0.5% above the MPR. Let me put it in that form. But now, if they were to give out these loans to small businesses, to manufacturers and all of that, they will make more money. And by implication, it makes it, incentivizes lending money to SMEs. Money will be very much available. The banks would rather prefer to borrow out money, to SMEs and other, manufacturers and other sectors of the economy than to keep money with the central bank. So it means that funds will be available for lending, and which by implication should incentivize, access to funding, access to financing and all of that. So this is basically how SMEs will be impacted because of the availability of funds. I think by implication you will see now banks scouting for people on the street to come and take loan, and that is what is going to happen. And it also gives the lenders, the negotiating powers also to say, oh, okay, this is what it is. I'm going to, negotiate. It gives them more, leverage to negotiate on the interest rate that they are taking the loan from. And if you look at our major lenders like the likes of Dangote's, and whatnot, they will have more negotiating powers. And what that does to the economy is that it incentivizes production. It boosts the productive, capacity in the economy, because interest rate has been talked down, it's been negotiated, and all of that. And if you look at it from the context of foreign portfolio investment, the figures are very favorable. We have been seeing a lot of FPIs now. The returns on it is more fancier, more attractive to investors because of the high rates that is attributed to their investment returns. So it's a good one, but I think that is more of a short-term impact it's having. And we expect to see more in terms of foreign direct investment, which ultimately have a long-term impact on the economy. It gives employment, create opportunities, boost productivity and our exports and all of that.
I still like to speak further on the tweaking of the asymmetrical corridor. Of course, and the ability of banks to lend and protect, small depositors and all that, while the CBN is still retaining liquidity ratio at 30%. How I mean, what's the connection? I mean, how will the banks be able to do that if you have tweaked this, but you retain the liquidity ratio at 30%?
You see, fundamentally, there are various parameters, there are various tools that the CBN can use, to make monetary, policies, adjustment and decisions and whatnot. So each of the tools that they use is meant to, address a particular issue or solve a particular problem at a particular time. They cannot use all of it holistically. MPR is maintained for a reason. The asymmetric corridor, is tweaked for a reason. Before, if the banks keeps the money with the central banks or keeps it with them to lend out, to lenders, it makes no difference because the 250 plus / 250 plus basis points means that, the benefits is equated. So now the logic behind that is that the MPR is being maintained. It doesn't only serve, the purpose of just maintaining it for a reason. It addresses inflation, if you look at it from that aspect. And in order to address inflation, another important aspect is the foreign exchange. And what does that do to the foreign exchange if the MPR is relatively high? It instills stability in the foreign exchange market, and it gives, investors will be able to predict the trajectory at which, our policies are going. So this would make them, invest more in the country, and that's where we are seeing more of FX flows in the country. And look at our look at our.
You know why I asked that question? Because on the one hand, you are saying banks, we are giving you laxity to, give out, more loans. But on the other hand, while you're retaining that liquidity, you're also tying the bank's ability to perform the same function.
The liquidity ratio is more of a prudential ratio. It's financial soundness indicator. It's important that, banks, in fact, as we speak, a number of banks have, liquidity ratios far in excess of 30%. So I think the major issue is maybe the cash reserve requirement, which I'm sure that is what you actually meant. Cash reserve requirement, for each deposit, a bank is expected to keep cash.
Yes.
Now, that's cash reserve requirements. Remember that in September, it was as high as 50%. So the central bank actually reduced it for commercial banks to 45%. And for merchant banks, of course, retained that, 16%. So if you look at the trajectory, so far, you will realize that the central bank is gradually moving into the easing space. Okay, even though, yes, monetary policy is still tight the way it is. But compared to what we had before, okay, it was very, very tight before because of the high rate of inflation. So today that we are beginning to see, disinflation, inflation coming down. And if you look at it globally, okay, that appears to be the trend. Recently, the U.S. Fed, cut the Fed fund rate. You find the Fed fund rate now hovering around between 4% and 5%. The Bank of England also, cut their benchmark rate. In Africa, just as they mentioned, if you find in Egypt, for example, Egypt central bank, held rates. Ghana, some time ago, had to slash their bench policy rate by as much as 350 basis points. But that's also because of the fact that in Ghana, inflation was actually really coming down. Today, we find it as single digit. So that appears to be the trend worldwide, and that's also why the Central Bank of Nigeria has also seen the reason to begin to ease. But in doing so, they have to do that very cautiously. Again, for reasons he has mentioned, number one, inflation rate is still high at 16.02% or 0.5%. No matter how you look at it, it's still high. Okay, and there is also the risk coming from the fiscal side. We also see, government is still financing budget, through budget deficits, through borrowing. So that's a risk, on its own part. And let us even give it to them. I'm talking about the central bank in the sense that they have a lot of data at their disposal that is not at our own disposal. So information asymmetry is in their favor. And that's why you find the Monetary Policy Committee is assisted by so many bodies. The Monetary Policy Technical Committee is there, the Liquidity Assessment Group is there, the Fiscal Assessment Committee is there, the Monetary Policy Implementation Committee is there. So all these bodies, provide data to members of the MPC. They start meeting on Monday and then come up with the thing on Tuesday. So that tells you they really go through, they expose a lot of data, information before they come up with that decision. And that's also why you find that out of the 12 members, all 12 members, majority decision is what produced that, that outcome. So the summary of what I'm saying is that the MPC is gradually easing. I think they are easing monetary. By the time they meet in February, I can bet that we'll see further easing. Because if you notice the communique, under the outlook, which is the last paragraph of that communique, the central bank governor indicated, he said it there, that the bank, is positive, that the disinflation we are currently witnessing, would continue. So that's the expectation channel. So it's important that the central bank continues to, give out this kind of, communication, because that will also help to shape current decisions. If you think that inflation rates will go up tomorrow, you want to buy now, and by so doing, you put pressure on prices. But when the central bank is telling you that they are confident that prices will still trend downwards, that will also moderate the kind of actions,
Absolutely.
particularly now that we're entering the festive season.
This is the link I wanted you to do, because all the financial experts, how to explain away all these technologies that we don't know. What Demola and I, our job is to link these technicalities, with the investors and other.
So that we can understand better.
Have a
better understanding.
Yeah.
Dr. Obo, I mean, just like it has been said that the interest rates have been maintained under this current CBN government, what are the implications? When are we going to see the inflation digit coming down to just one digit?
Thank you very much. And just to lend credence to what Prof and my friend said, what we have technically done is to again bring growth recovery into consideration in our decisions. He has already touched on the area of the corridor, so I don't want to say so much. The only point I want to add there is that because banks are looking for investment with the highest return, So once they find that the rate at which they will gain from the standing deposit facility corridor at the central bank is lower, and they can get higher rate elsewhere, including borrowing to their clients, they go there. So we would expect that those funds that have been idle at the central bank just stay overnight, and you get your interest rate at 22.5%, should now move out, to the real sector, including SMEs and the rest of them. So in that case, you have more credit being channeled out to support growth. So that is just what I just want to add there. In respect of whether we are easing, that's technical. So I leave that. But the point I want to make there is that MPC relies on data. And where we have small window to support growth, why not? MPC is always ready to do that. Now, you ask about what it means, what the rate hold, what it means for the economy.
For the economy, yes.
Okay. So what it means now is that, and it's good for Nigerians to begin to take interest, to look at the communique. Every word, every sentence in the communique has its own significance and implications. And I'm happy the way Prof just brought it out. That sentence is the closing sentence on the outlook section. And what the MPC is saying is that based on our forecast, because we forecast inflation, looking forward, the short to medium term forecast,
Okay.
yes, the outlook is positive. What it means is that inflation is very likely, and it's a forecast. So
It's a forecast?
Yes, it's a forecast. So you have some probabilities.
Minus,
Yes, for
pluses.
errors. Yes, it's a forecast. You don't get it, completely, error-free. So, but our forecasts have been very accurate in the bank. So, of course,
Lately.
the numbers from the Bureau of Statistics, it is their duty to release the numbers. But we also forecast based on a lot of variables that we put into that model. So the forecast is pointing to a brighter future. Okay. Brighter future in the sense that inflation is very likely to sustain its downward trend, to decelerate going forward in the short to medium term. Yeah. Ceteris paribus again.
I would
So
ask.
So
Prof,
what
yeah.
it means is that if that happens, and because it's subject to some sudden shocks, there could be some shocks that might change your prediction or your forecast. Yeah.
I was going to ask
You have forecasted and you think nothing will going to happen, and then all of a sudden you see
happens.
external shocks beyond your control.
That is why, Prof, we ask in social science, what's your margin of error?
Very good. Exactly, you are there.
Yes.
Yes.
So what's the margin of error?
Yeah. So our margin of error is very, very minimal.
Okay.
Actually, our significance is at 1%, which means in most cases you are 99% almost reliable.
Almost reliable.
Yes. Yes.
That's
Ceteris paribus again. Yeah, all things being equal. Yes. And,
Okay.
and I assure you, our forecasting capability in the bank has been outstanding, not just in the recent time. It's been outstanding because, again, we compare when the forecast is made and the actual numbers are released. We compare the margin of error, the difference between our forecast, because the forecast comes before the actual numbers are released. And if you look at that over time, the margin of error has been very, very minimal. And you need to give it to the central bank.
I give it to you if you say
Some
so.
economic experts have, suggesting that you should focus more on resolving structural issues instead of, depending solely on monetary policy.
Yeah. So that is fine, and that takes us to the arena of policy coordination. The wisdom of early macroeconomists is this fiscal and monetary handshake. Each of them having their own clear objective, but again the need to have a handshake and coordinate and collaborate, since we are operating a single economy. So that collaboration, I assure you, has deepened tremendously under this current management. So there are a lot of meetings where and MPC acknowledge, the central bank acknowledge that we cannot do it all by ourselves. Because inflation, yes, theoretically it's a monetary phenomenon, but there are structural drivers, especially in developing markets like Nigeria, where we have a lot of structural issues. We cannot deny the fact that transportation, for instance, the price of PMS and the rest of them, energy, even insecurity, all these issues affect inflation to some extent. So what needs to be done is that, and I must acknowledge that the federal government, the fiscal authority, are also doing a lot. If you look at the inflation numbers, you will see that food inflation has come down tremendously. And I tell you, a larger part of that role is in the fiscal sector. Food supply, increased food supply, and the rest of them. And if that has not happened, we wouldn't have recorded that. So when we attribute the credit for slow inflation, we also acknowledge what the fiscal is doing. So those structural drivers are within the realm of the fiscal, and government is addressing a lot of them. Yeah. Of course, look at PMS. The price has, relatively stabilized. Again, we talk about stability, not the value, the high price, yes,
of course.
but the stability allow you to plan. Yes.
Is it the food or prices stability, food stability, that is driving down the inflation?
Again, as I said, inflation is decelerating due to a lot of reasons. The tightening, because there are several causes of inflation, but the main monetary cause is that when there's too much money chasing few goods, it drives the price up, right? So central bank is doing its bid. The aspect that central bank can effectively control is to reduce aggregate demand, and we do that by tightening, ensuring that not so much money is in circulation. You get the point? That is on one angle. The structural issues that Demola raised are those issues that have to do with, in terms of supply-driven factors. For example, if there's not enough supply of food, prices will go up. Because there are few food items, few quantity of food items. If transportation is rising, it's going to add to the price of food. Yeah. Those ones are cost push. You get the point. So those are the aspects that the federal government are addressing. So there's a synchronization, and that helps to drive inflation down.
Okay, Dr. Abo, thank you. We have a few messages coming in. I would like to take some of those messages quickly. Ahmed Baba Dikwa from Maiduguri has sent a message. He said, this administration's central bank has demonstrated a commendable commitment to monetary order and professional conduct. The notable stabilization of our economy, especially given the challenging circumstances inherited from the past, is a clear signal that the policy approach is sound. My primary concern, however, lies with the long-term sustainability of this progress beyond the current administration. So, sustainability factor. A.T. Michael from Lokoja, why are the lending rate on interest from microfinance banks high at the moment? Well, everybody can answer this. Then good morning, NTA. Central bank lending rate at 29.5, while commercial bank annual lending rate is 65. How can the price of commodities be reduced in markets with this rate? This is from Musa Abubakar. Again, central bank lending rate is 29.5. Commercial bank annual lending rate is 65. How can the price of commodities be reduced in the markets with this rate? Now, this one is Al Hassan from Gombe. Government monetary policies are working but one-sided. My worry is the cost of fertilizer and its accompanying accessory. A bag of rice, maize, is being sold at between 24,000 and 27,000 naira, while the cost of a bag of fertilizer is between 60 and 70,000 naira. How do you explain that to the farmers? Okay, I think let's take this last one, and I will start from Farouk.
Okay, in terms of fertilizer,
yes.
Well, there are various factors that determines the cost of commodities, and fertilizer is also a commodity. Cost of production, in the case of importation, in the case of supplies, the availability of it. These are factors that determines what the cost of fertilizer can be or it can look like. Certain things in terms of this kind of cost cannot be tweaked because it's something that fundamentally is dependent on, the production cost and also the demand and supply also in some instances, which I believe we have high supply demand for fertilizer in Nigeria, and we can look at the production cost. So we are not expecting, in spite of the efforts in terms of the monetary policy improvements, to see that we have immediate changes in the prices of things, it takes a little bit of time to start having such kind of impact, especially within the mid-term and long-term. So that is basically, our expectations. So the price of food items plunging down is a good sign that, we have sufficient supply. Just like what Doctor said, the fiscal authorities are doing a lot also in that aspect. And this, I would say, has contributed in, having, food availability or food sufficiency in the country, which ultimately plunges down the prices of food. So it will take a little bit of time before this adjustment will start, to take effect in the real economy.
I don't know if there is anywhere, except I don't know what kg bag of rice is talking about. Maybe the 50 kg, and I don't know in Gombe, because it's saying it's between 24,000 and 27,000 naira.
Maybe that's
25 kg.
Maybe
That's
25
kg.
kg.
That's
25 kg. Okay. The other question, Professor Waleke, he says, lending rate. CBN is lending at 29.5, while commercial bank annual lending rate is 65. How can the price of commodities be reduced in the market at this rate?
Well, I doubt if the figure he gave for the commercial banks, I don't think
it's not.
Yes, it might not be as high, but of course, certainly it's higher. Certainly is a lot higher. Of course, it has to be higher because, just as we have explained earlier, that MPR is more like the floor. Okay. It's a benchmark rate. So if the central bank is lending to you at 27.5, it means that if you are to unlend, you have to add, before you can lend. And in adding before you can lend, you also take into cognizance your other costs, maybe of course, electricity as a bank. The cost of electricity is there. As a bank, the cost of also providing security, is there. Other costs must be factored in.
These costs are also built into
that's the point.
Yes,
that's the point. So that's the point. So, but the fact remains that's the MPR, remains a major component. Now, on the issue of the fertilizer agriculture, I just want to say something there. I think for me, the agri sector is one area the fiscal authority, the government, must deliberately, intentionally, intervene. Okay, even if it means by way of subsidies. So when we remove subsidy from, say, petrol, we understand why subsidies were removed from petrol. Okay, we should be able to see subsidies in production, in agriculture, for example, in things like farm inputs, so that they can be available to farmers, because we run the risk of reversing these gains we're having now in terms of the food inflation coming down by next year. Okay, because farmers are already complaining of high farm inputs. It is these farm inputs, okay, that will also by next year, okay, translate to the output prices. So if we don't control them now, okay, they may also reflect the price of food items in the coming months. So which is why I think the government can also come in to help by subsidizing farmers, by ensuring that these fertilizers, can go around through subsidies. So subsidy, I'm advocating for subsidy in agriculture, subsidy in things like farm input, all right, because that will go a long way. So because as has been rightly said, we have
what about subsidy in the housing sector as well?
No, the food, for me, food is is critical, because if you look at the MBS classification of the drivers of inflation, okay, there are 13 classifications. The first one there is food. Okay. In fact, food used to be account for more than 50%, but today I think the weight of food is around 48%. But 40%. But when you also add the second classification there, which is restaurants. Okay, restaurant we refer to meals away from home, according to the National Bureau of Statistics. So if you add food, okay, and you add meals away from home, the two of them will also give you a weight that is higher than 50%. So when it comes to inflationary pressure today, Okay, food is dominant. The food component is major. And because it is major, if the fiscal side, the government now, can play its part to address that food side, it will go a long way to drop the headline inflation and will also help the central bank complement the central bank's effort in fighting inflation. Because all that the central bank can do, as has been mentioned, is to control the demand side. Okay, using the operating targets. In monetary economics, we say the interest rate is the operating target. The operating target.
Okay.
Then we have the intermediate target, which is the money supply. Okay, particularly your broad money, M2 or M3. And then you have the final targets in the case of Nigeria, which is inflation. And then we also talk about channels of monetary policy, whether it's interest rate channel or credit channel or exchange rate channel, okay, or asset channel, and so on. So the point I'm making is that the central bank can only deal with the demand side. The supply side, structural issues, supply side, those are the responsibilities of the government. And that's why the two must, have a handshake. The two must work together to bring down inflation. The central bank may not be able to bring down inflation all alone.
Okay,
the government must come in.
I just want to corroborate on what Prof said.
Okay.
It is very pertinent that, we look into that very well. A lot of farmers today have recorded serious losses because after their input is not in any way, corresponding to the output they are getting. They spent a lot in farming, and now the sudden plunge in the prices of, food items. So this has really affected them. And what it would do is that if nothing is done about it, it would disincentivize them, to further engage in agricultural, production, and that would also have a domino effect on, all of these rates that we are calculating. So it's very important that the government needs to come into as a rescue mission to save farmers and to save the prices of foods. That would also support the monetary authorities in making informed decisions. So I think I so much align with Prof on that.
The margin of error
Yes.
is increasing.
Yes.
Okay, Dr. Obo, how is the CBN balancing his dual mandate of price stability and economic growth?
Okay. Let me please react to one of the questions.
Yes.
That asks, and I think it's Ahmed.
Yes, on
who commended.
Sustenance.
Yeah, and Ahmed,
Yes.
thank you very much for the commendation. Anytime you encourage a team, it helps them inspires them to further work. But the question of sustainability of the reforms, which he mentioned, is vital and strategic. How are we going to sustain this? And I think it's everybody's business, including the media, that what has happened and has worked should be sustained. Everybody in his or her corner should be able to do that. So what the management of the bank is doing is to ensure that reforms work, and when you are committed to reforms, they deliver credible dividend. So it's everybody's business, and I think we should all take interest to hold leadership to account. Okay. I'll just leave it there. Your question is about dual mandate. Now, the mandate of the Central Bank of Nigeria is monetary and price stability.
Okay.
Yes, it's monetary and price stability. Creating a conducive environment that will promote growth. So, on our side, we want to ensure that macro stability is established and sustained over time to be able to engender growth. And Mr. Governor made a very important statement yesterday. If you listen to the Q&A, he said that growth must sit on stability. And he gave a very simple, connection, that if you listen very well, it makes a lot of meaning. And it's true with macroeconomic theory, that when you have macro stability, when we talk about macroeconomic stability, we're talking about low and stable inflation, stable exchange rate, and the rest of them, with inflows coming, you have, and what we have attained now is macroeconomic stability.
Okay.
Right. That is foundational to attracting investments. And when you are able to attract investment, and he alluded to it, we have a lot of capital inflows, even local investors are interested. The Naira-denominated asset is something everybody wants to invest in now. And for your information, people don't care about saving in dollars anymore because your Naira, you know it is stable, it's predictable. You know, so if you are storing dollars in your account, expecting some speculative activities, that the Naira is going to crash and you're going to get more Naira in return to your dollar, you are just wasting your time. You look at our reserves. We are at in excess of $46 billion, enough to fund imports of goods and services for about 11 months. That's not a joke. Compare it with our peer countries. That's one of the highest reserve position we have. So that is evidence of macroeconomic stability. That is what investors are seeing out there, and they are coming in. So the point I'm trying to make is that once we are able to attain that stability and we are attracting investment, it will now be able to promote growth.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, we have more questions. Okay. This one actually is directed to you. This one is from Hyson from Abakaliki. It said most of the banks hardly load cash on their ATM. And one customer once said his bank had told him at the counter that there was no cash and further told him to go to the POS operators. What is the cause of this? Is the CBN monetary policy responsible for it? One. Then the second one says, good morning, Nigeria. Today topic is very good. Monetary policy of the CBN is working and it is helping the economy to grow. One thing I want to emphasize is the need for CBN to do more to ensure sustainability. May God help us. Mohammed from Okene in Kogi State. This one is from Professor Sebastian Oremadu of Michael Okpara University of Agriculture. It said, despite low interest rate, we have high transportation cost. Growth in rail sector is still very low. You respond to them when we come back from this break. Stay with us. Thanks for staying with us. You're still on to Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the NTA. And our discussion is still on the MPC resolution of yesterday. And we still have our guest here. And before we went on that short break, a lot of questions and comments came in, which the CBN director would like to respond to. Would you want me to repeat them? Yes, or you? Yes. Okay. Okay. All right. This one says, this from Ison is from Abakaliki. So most of the banks hardly load cash on their ATM. One customer once said his bank had told him at the counter that there was no cash and further told him to go to the POS operators. What is the cause of this? Is the CBN monetary policy responsible? That's question one. This one is, good morning, Nigeria. Today topic is very good. Monetary policy of the CBN is working and it is helping the economy to grow. One thing I want to emphasize is the needs for CBN to do more to ensure sustainability. May God help us. Mohammed from Okene in Kogi State. Professor Sebastian Oremadu is from Michael Okpara University of Agriculture. And he's saying that despite low interest rates, we have high transportation cost. Growth in rail sectors is still very low.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate all the questions. I start with the issue of cash through the ATM, or the machines. Central Bank ensures that cash is available through to those that will need cash. We should also, however, remember, and a lot of effort are made in this direction, The central bank has a whole department that is called currency operations,
Yeah.
that is devoted to ensure that currency is available at every point in time. So if you get to your your ATM, and you can't get your cash, you have a reason to worry because it is your money. And there are channels for which you can complain. There are channels for it. Even though central bank is moving towards a cashless economy, and that is best global practice. In fact, there are many countries in the world that you go to that you can't even use cash. People will not collect cash. But we know we are gradually transiting. So no one should be denied of his or her cash, at any point in time. That does not mean that we should not encourage a cashless economy. The POS are there to complement what the banks are doing. They are not substitutes. They are not substitutes. So that is the point. But the point here is that if there are repeated issues that has to do with continued, absence of cash in ATM, the customer has a right to send a message to the CBN. And our social media handles are there to just send a message, even if Facebook or WhatsApp or whatever. And there's a whole department of consumer protection in the central bank again that is devoted to addressing customers' complaints.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. But this Professor Sebastian says, despite low interest rate, we
Yes.
have high transportation costs.
Yes.
Growth in the real sector is
It's
still low.
Yes. So that is correct. But when we juxtapose the growth we record from where we are coming, then you will appreciate. For the first time in many quarters, during the second quarter GDP numbers, we were able to achieve 4.23% growth, which for the first time in many quarters, that rate is higher than our population growth rate. You get the point? We know that is not where we want to be, but gradually government is working in synchronization with the central bank to ensure that that growth increases. These transportation costs, energy costs are some of the structural issues, yes, that government is trying to address to ensure that those costs come down and growth is encouraged to, get higher.
Somebody said that 100 naira is almost out of circulation. What is happening? Femi from Abuja.
That is not any deliberate policy of the bank. But these are some of the issues I will take away and confirm with relevant department if some of the nodes are in short supply. And I've taken note of this, and I will make the relevant department, aware of that and ensure that, because all the nodes are valid, and they should be available. Yeah.
How does being taken out of the grades? Remember, we had the beautiful discussion. When Nigeria, were taken out of the grades and everything. How did it impact on your rates, on your outcomes?
Yeah, the first positive impact is confidence building or confidence strengthening. What putting you inside the grey list means is that investors and all people, all institutions that transact with Nigeria have to be cautious, because they are suspicious of the kind of transactions, that you are doing in terms of terrorism, financing, and the rest of them. And if you are dealing with an unreliable counterparty, you get the point? Mm-hmm. A risky counterparty, it adds cost. The way you price that person is higher.
Definitely.
Do you get the point?
Yeah.
Because the risk is higher than somebody that you trust. So putting us in that gray, and you can see gray, Gray is not a good, very, very celebrating color. You get the point. So putting us, when you say there are gray areas, it means there are some issues that we are not sure about. You are not
They're
clear.
not clear. It's not transparent.
Exactly. So when we are, now that we are taken out of that list, we have a clean bill. The country as a whole has a clean bill. Even the way they deal with travelers, when they say you are from Nigeria, and they want to see the investment you want to have offshore, outside Nigeria, they want to check your records. It comes with a higher level of credibility.
So it builds confidence, investor confidence.
Who investors into the country, the way we are treated is much, much better.
Okay, I'd like to talk to Professor Walike, and this is usually, your end point when we discuss issues of MPR, CBN, MPR rates, whether retained or, adjusted. And you always, the fact that it encourages lending to, MSMEs and all that, but you always caution or raise the issue of concern whether banks would reciprocate, the same action.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering, why will they not?
Yes, why would they not? I think we have somehow tangentially, talked about why they won't. Again, the issue of other factors. Banks will always tell you that there are other costs that they are grappling with, and these other costs too, they tend to build them in. The fact remains that prices generally are sticky downwards. They're sticky. You find the central bank today increasing the monetary policy rate. So what do we find banks do? Immediately they will also revise, their own rates. So once central bank increases, you find them automatically also repricing their loans. In fact, you get a message saying that your something has been increased. Yes, but when the central bank reduces, they drag. So that's what I'm saying. They're sticky. Yes. They don't respond almost immediately because, as I said, they will need to also take into cognizance the other factors too, the other costs, that go into their
so is it a concern?
Operations. So of course it's a concern, and that's why too, as I said, the Monetary Policy Committee has a number of bodies that are assisting it. One of which is the Monetary Policy Implementation Committee. There is an implementation committee within the bank that should also be oversight, checking these things and trying to ensure that banks in turn comply. Now, one of the things too, I would like the director, since he's here, to take away. I was happy when he said the question you asked him, he will take note of it. And another thing I will also want him to take note of has to do with this issue of mutilated and unfit notes. There appear to be so many. You go to banks today, what they give you in circulation. Okay, so what is the bank currently doing to ensure that, I know there's, of course, the cost of a replacement is usually a factor, but the central bank should ensure, particularly now that we are moving into, and the funny thing, this festive season now, you're going to find that the new notes, you only find them at events when people spray.
That's
people will be looking
for the major issue.
People will be looking for new notes. Meanwhile, people are hoarding them.
Yeah, they're
so
hoarding
I
them.
think this is the time for the central bank to put in place measures to ensure that these new notes, once they make them available to banks actually also give them out without hoarding. Because
some people even go to buy them and
that's what
resell.
I'm saying yes, which is of course illegal, an offense. Yes, it's a crime. So these are things the central bank at this point in time, should take cognizance of.
Do you have a department that monitors all these activities?
Yes, and that is Currency Operations Department.
But we have not been getting any feedback.
Yeah, they have. In fact, you will remember that people have been charged to court for openly spreading Nigerian naira, marching on them and all that. There have been cases. There have been sensitization, people that have been hoarding those have been arrested. I think some cases should still be in court as I speak. But it's an issue because there's a value chain, there's a cycle through which these notes get to the, consumers, from the minting to the central bank, and then we don't distribute those cash directly. They have to pass through commercial banks, deposit money banks.
But when you get to the banks, they tell you that is how we get them from the CBN.
But in terms, no, I'm talking about hoarding of new notes. That is it. But with this, what the bank again, the central bank, has a way of checking how those notes are distributed to customers through the commercial banks. No commercial bank is allowed to hoard those notes or to sell. If there's any evidence that those notes are sold, it becomes an offense. It becomes anyone that is asked by the bank to purchase, to pay an extra dime on those notes should report to the central bank.
Okay.
And that bank will be sanctioned. That is on one side. The mutilated notes is something that every period they are withdrawn from the system. They are withdrawn from the system from time to time. But it's also a point that I'm going to raise. As we approach the festive period, central bank is very cautious. It's a seasonal effect. So at this time, we understand that there could be some plans to sabotage the system and ensure scarcity of notes. But I want to assure Nigerians that central bank is aware of that. And you could remember last year, the governor did so much, and there was a seamless availability of notes during the festive season. And there's also machinery in place to ensure that as we approach the festive season, you will have enough notes. Nobody should worry to hoard any note because there will be no scarcity during this period. I assure you of that.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Farouk, I know that right now we're experiencing a lot of stability, but with global uncertainties, how do you think the CBN can, navigate this?
Well, global uncertainties are issues that sometimes are diversifiable and sometimes are not. As we can see, locally, we can do a lot, in navigating through all of these things. We know our economy depends solely on oil as we speak today, in terms of, our export gains. So this goes to tell you that we need to prioritize and diversify our economy. Focus should be there. Incentivize, other manufacturing and productive, capacities in the countries. So once we're able to do that, we'll be able to diversify a lot of that. And also, there should be proper coordination between the fiscal and monetary authorities.
Yeah.
This would ensure that any shock that is being envisaged to come in will be able to be, mitigated, because if the monetary authority is doing a lot and the fiscal authority in terms of borrowing and taxes and whatnot are not, and cutting also government spendings, if that is not aligning very well with the monetary policy, so even if there are external shocks, the ability to absorb it will be very difficult. So that is why it is important we try to look at that. At the heart of everything is that we need to, diversify our economy. We should leverage on that. And at the heart of it, food security is very important. We must also leverage on that because, food today is the major driver of our inflation. So once we're able to solve that, it will go a long way. And this is something that we have the productive potentials in Nigeria. We have good arable lands. We have, farmers that are willing to go to farmlands. But also another issue is the insecurity in those areas. These are things that we need to work on to ensure that farmers are able to go and farm safely and all of that. So if you look at the summation of all of these things will amount to positioning us in a way that we'll be able to surmount, any external shocks. As I told you, some are diversifiable and some are not. Just look at what happened during the COVID-19 global economic, shutdown. So this is something that not even the strongest country could be able to, scale through. But if you look at far back during the global, financial crisis, when Sanusi Lamido was a CBN governor, Nigeria was able, to sustain, the momentum and all of that. And that goes, to the support that the fiscal authorities gave the monetary authorities and all of that. So at the heart of everything, there should be this coordination between these two authorities. We must prioritize also food security. We must also improve on transportation and energy. These CNG initiatives, the government needs to critically look at it. Even the Dangote have invested a lot of that. That speaks of the viability of it in terms of addressing logistics issues. So the government also needs to look at that from that direction, moving goods from one location to another. That would go a long way in cutting, the prices of goods and services.
You have touched on almost all the shocks, But my last question to Professor Waleke and to Dr. here,
Dr. Obo.
Dr. Obo here is, if we could use the Likert scale format, Professor Waleke, what would you say would be the most likely threat that could push up inflation again?
Okay, thank you.
You taught me. So.
Yes. Is it a 5-point Likert or 3-point Likert you're talking about? Likert scale. Anyway, I think the risks, the downside risks are there, no doubt. And I think for me next year, what appears to be a very strong risk next year will be the election season.
Okay.
Yes, election season next year.
There'll be a lot of campaigns.
But the good thing is that the MPC is also meeting in February. They have an opportunity to meet in February. I think by second quarter of next year, my fear is that if it's not well handled, the economy might take the back seat, and then we'll now begin to now see reversals in some of the gains. But I don't pray for that. But election season, in my view, constitutes a major threat. And why is that so? You say the moment and that's also part of why this MPC didn't reduce the MPR. Because if the MPC reduces the MPR, what it means is that you have more liquidity, more money, and then you start buying dollars to do, elections. So it's important that the central bank should continue to watch it, the liquidity in the system, so that more money, don't get into the hands of, these people. So elections then for me represents the greatest threat.
Okay. Dr. Obo.
Well,
and by the way, I needed to show you, but this is the best of the lot I got.
You'll get better ones. I assure you.
I say it's the best.
Oh, okay, because this is mutilated anyway.
No. There's a way that we test the level of mutilation, whether it's fit or unfit. So there's a standard way to test, a fitness test. But coming to the threat to inflation or downside risk, Prof has mentioned some of them. And again, all those issues were thoroughly considered by the MPC. And every consideration cannot be reflected in that 4-page communique.
No, that's why I said the most. I said Likert scale. So three points, yes.
Yeah, so the issue of election-related spending is one of the risks, which we have catalogued.
Okay.
Yes, what the bank and the MPC has done at every point in time is to catalog all the key risks, right? And then plan or prepare what we call mitigation plan. Yes. What is this risk? We identify it. How is it likely to crystallize? We have a bucket for it. And then what is the risk level? Is it high? Is it moderate? Is it low? We classify it. And then what is the mitigation plan? We do all that. So he had just taken it away from me.
So
it's also part of the reason why MPC had to be cautious in adjusting the MPR.
All right.
There are other issues of tax and so on. We are also all cataloging them and preparing a mitigation plan.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Victor Obo, Director, Monetary Policy Department of the CBN. Thank you for throwing more light into the MPC resolution yesterday. Thank you so much for coming.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much.
Also want to thank, as usual, Professor Uche Uwaleke, Professor of Capital Market, Nasarawa State University. Thank you so much for your contribution this morning.
Demola, thank you.
And Farouk Abdullahi, financial analyst, thank you for your analysis. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's always my pleasure.
All right. Thanks. That's Good Morning Nigeria for today. I am Ademola Adeoye.
Why are you looking at me?
Are you looking at
You
me
should tell the
too?
camera. It's Ademola Adeoye, and I am Claire. I just wanted to add that Professor Uche Uwaleke is the first professor of capital market from Nasarawa State University. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.